Have you ever walked into a place only to be treated as if you didn't matter at all? That's exactly what happened to him. A humble, quiet, simple man who only wanted some information. But in that luxury hotel, no one bothered to look beyond appearances. They ignored him, disrespected him, belittled him, almost as if they could measure someone's worth by the clothes they wear or the color of their skin. What they didn't know is that life has a powerful way of turning the tables. And that day, in that very moment, the entire hotel was about to discover that the man they treated like an inconvenience was, in fact, the new general director. Yes, the leader, the one in charge of every detail in that place. Get ready, because the story you're about to watch isn't just about justice. It's about respect, humility, and how a single moment can change everything. If this message speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video, because stories like this deserve to reach as many people as possible.
From the moment Marcus set foot in the luxurious lobby of the St. Aurelius Hotel, it became clear that this would be no ordinary day. The wall clock marked nearly 8 in the morning, and the staff moved back and forth with the typical silent haste of sophisticated environments, a precise, almost rehearsed choreography in which every glance, every step, seemed to follow invisible rules. The golden chandeliers hovered over the space like private constellations, radiating a glow so intense it seemed to defy any human imperfection. Marcus stood in stark contrast to all of it. He wore simple clothes, discreet black pants, a blue shirt already a little worn, and a pair of clean but visibly old shoes. He could easily have passed for a tired tourist or someone who had walked into the wrong place. He knew that, and yet he moved forward with the confidence of someone carrying a truth in his pocket. Appearance, to him, had never been a fair measure of character or competence. It was just another layer the world insisted on misreading. He was there for a surprise visit, not just an inspection, but a silent test, essential for assessing the hotel's true spirit. Not the one shown in the luxurious ads or polished speeches, but the one that surfaced when no one imagined they were being observed. As he walked through the lobby, he felt eyes resting on him, some brief, others far too long to be discreet. There was curiosity, judgment, and even a hint of disdain hiding beneath well-shaped eyebrows. Every step he took seemed to spark the same unspoken question: what is this man doing here? Marcus kept his gaze steady ahead, breathing calmly. Throughout his life, he had learned that many people judge before hearing a single word, and sometimes before daring to look a little closer, but that was precisely why his presence there had a greater purpose. He walked as someone opening the pages of an ancient book, full of stories ready to unfold. He observed everything: the receptionist's slightly tense smile, the waiter who avoided eye contact, the manager who frowned upon noticing him. Every gesture, every expression was a clue, and Marcus absorbed it all with the serenity of someone who already knew that, before the end of that day, the hotel's golden glow would not be enough to hide what truly mattered. It was the beginning of a story, not just his, but everyone's there. A story that would reveal far more about those people than any flawless resume, charming speech, or meticulous training ever could. A story that would inevitably change the fate of the St. Aurelius. And Marcus was ready to turn it page by page. Even before reaching the main counter, Marcus noticed the subtle, yet unmistakable, shift in the energy around him. It was as if a silent wave had swept through the lobby, altering the rhythm of conversations and the fluidity of movement. Employees whispered discreetly behind impeccable floral arrangements, glances were diverted with rehearsed speed, and some of the more honest faces even frowned, almost reflexively. The environment, so accustomed to rolling out invisible carpets for suited executives, discreet celebrities, and millionaire families, seemed to choke at the presence of someone considered out of place. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect posture and a flawlessly tailored uniform, lifted her head as soon as Marcus approached. Her smile appeared quickly, but died before reaching her eyes, revealing the discomfort she tried to hide. "Good morning, sir. How may I help you?" she asked, her tone blending professional politeness with a cautious alertness, as though she were ready to react at the slightest hint of inconvenience. Marcus replied with the same calm he carried like armor. Yes, I need some information about the hotel's facilities. His voice was serene, yet held a discreet firmness, almost imperceptible to anyone who judged only by appearances. He did not raise his voice, but each word seemed to rest in the air with its own weight. Still, the receptionist looked him up and down with a subtle, or not so subtle, scrutiny before responding. It was as if she were silently calculating the exact level of attention he deserved. Marcus noticed. He always noticed. Across the lobby, two staff members exchanged muffled remarks, believing distance would shield them. But the lobby had generous acoustics, and Marcus caught enough fragments. He doesn't look like a guest. He probably doesn't have a reservation. Maybe he's lost. He took a deep breath, letting the irritation dissolve before any trace of it reached his face. It wasn't the first time he had faced that kind of judgment. A lifetime of walking in contrast to other people's expectations had made him resilient, but not immune. And unfortunately, he knew it wouldn't be the last time. But he also knew something none of them did. On that day, on that seemingly ordinary morning, there was a unique opportunity to transform that reality. And every sideways glance, every whisper, every hesitant gesture only reinforced the necessity of what was about to unfold. Marcus straightened his posture. He observed, silent but attentive, and the hotel, without realizing it, was being observed in return. The test had begun long before any of them imagined. The receptionist, still maintaining her fragile mask of cordiality, asked Marcus to wait. Just a moment. However, the look she gave him suggested that this moment could easily stretch far beyond what was reasonable, perhaps minutes, perhaps long enough for him to simply give up and leave. In her expression, there was a silent conviction that Marcus had no urgency, no importance, and perhaps no rightful place in that environment at all. Unaware that she stood before someone far above the position she imagined, someone with the power to change professional destinies and entire reputations, she continued attending to other guests who arrived after him. Executives in perfectly fitted suits, women carrying gleaming designer handbags, foreign tourists who looked more like catalog models than ordinary travelers. For all of them, the receptionist's smile was wider, more genuine, her voice sweeter, her attention immediate. Marcus observed everything in silence. Every gesture, every exchange of glances, every tilt of the head was a fragment of the mosaic he was assembling. It was impossible to ignore the obvious pattern. The quality of service shifted drastically according to the appearance of the visitors. Some were received as if they were old friends, others were given automatic priority, even without asking. Meanwhile, he remained there, almost invisible, ignored, neglected, as though he were part of the lobby's static decor. But behind his calm posture and impassive expression, Marcus recorded everything. He made mental notes with surgical precision. The surprise visit had been planned exactly this way. No warnings, no preparations, no rehearsed speeches. He didn't want to assess the bright facade the hotel presented in meetings and reports. He wanted to observe what no document could reveal, the human character of the staff, the true essence beneath every impeccable uniform. A luxury hotel, he knew, doesn't become great through the opulence of its chandeliers, the softness of its carpets, or the grandeur of its floral arrangements. True greatness is born when employees understand that respect does not depend on appearance, social class, or silent prejudice. This was the principle he had defended from the beginning, and which, at that moment, St. Aurelius clearly had yet to master. Marcus took a deep breath, allowing the air to renew his calm. He remembered his own journey, the doors that had been closed in his face, the hasty judgments, the unexplained missed opportunities. Over time, each injustice had turned into fuel, and perhaps that day would become another of those moments. A chance to transform an elitist and distorted environment into a fairer reflection of what true excellence in service ought to be. He straightened his posture. The test was underway, and no one there seemed to realize they were being evaluated by someone whose gaze saw far more than they imagined. While waiting, Marcus noticed the firm sound of footsteps approaching, echoing over the polished marble. It was an assistant manager, recognizable by his perfectly adjusted tie, a posture too upright to be natural, and the trained gaze of someone whose job was to detect irregularities. He approached with a furrowed brow, observing Marcus as one might assess a potential disturbance, not a visitor. "Do you have a reservation, sir? Are you looking for someone?" he asked in a formal tone, though one heavy with rigidity. There was no courtesy in it, only an anxious vigilance, as if Marcus's mere presence in the lobby were a flaw in the system. Marcus responded with the same contained simplicity that always accompanied him. "I'm here to get to know some of the hotel's internal areas and better understand how the staff operates." The answer triggered immediate discomfort in the manager. His eyes narrowed, and he took a deep breath before forcing on an almost condescending smile. "I'm sorry, sir, but visits aren't allowed without prior authorization. This is a high-category hotel, you see?" The emphasis on the last sentence sounded like a lesson, a warning, perhaps even a reminder that Marcus did not belong there. The subtext was clear. There are places not meant for people like you. Marcus could have resolved everything at that very moment. He could have revealed his name, his true position, and shattered the manager's mask of authority in seconds. One word would have been enough for the man to completely change his posture, and perhaps even turn pale. But Marcus wasn't like that. He never had been. He believed that character isn't revealed under the pressure of titles or ranks, but in the ways people behave according to what they believe is reality. That's why he chose to observe before acting. He allowed each person there to reveal themselves fully, without filters, without fear, without intentions distorted by status. So he simply nodded, calmly. "I understand. Thank you for the information." The manager, pleased with himself, gave a slight nod, as if confirming that he had put things in order, and walked away. Inside, Marcus felt a mixture of sadness and determination. Sadness because every word spoken there, every poorly calculated gesture, represented a missed opportunity, a moment when empathy and professionalism could have shone, but were replaced by rushed judgment. Determination because, precisely for that reason, his presence there was necessary. It was that kind of attitude, disguised as efficiency, tinted with prejudice, that he was determined to transform completely. And as he watched the manager walk away, Marcus confirmed something he had long suspected. That visit was worth every second, because it revealed, with surgical precision, everything that needed to be changed. As the minutes passed, the staff's silent impatience began to spill over in increasingly less subtle ways. It was curious, and at the same time sad, to observe how the environment changed around Marcus the longer he remained there. Some employees cast quick, distrustful glances. Others seemed genuinely bothered, as if his presence in that impeccable lobby were an unwelcome interference in the carefully crafted setting meant to impress. At one point, an employee from the guest services department approached him. Her smile was so forced it looked more like a mask on the verge of cracking. "Do you need help finding the exit, sir?" she asked, with a tone sweet only on the surface, but carrying something bitter underneath. It was impossible to ignore the prejudice wrapped in that sentence, a polite invitation for him to leave the space, as if his mere existence there were too uncomfortable to tolerate. Marcus maintained the serenity that defined him. "Thank you, but I'm just waiting for assistance." The employee hesitated for a moment, seemingly unsure of what to say next. Then she stepped away with a tense smile, clearly regretting having approached him. Her discomfort seemed to spread to the others. More sideways glances, more whispers, more expressions revealing impatience or irritation. From the corner of the lobby, two receptionists exchanged muffled comments while laughing discreetly. They believed Marcus didn't notice, the way they leaned toward each other, how they looked away when caught, how they hid spiteful smiles. But he noticed. He noticed everything, and every gesture, every whisper, every micro-expression was recorded with the precision of someone who was there precisely to observe what no one dared to admit. Despite everything, Marcus showed no anger. There was no sign of resentment, indignation, or outrage in his face. Instead, he carried a quiet firmness, almost unshakable, the expression of someone who had faced far worse situations and learned, over time, to turn wounds into purpose. He knew that every second of that discomfort revealed deep truths about the staff. Truths that would never appear in reports, internal evaluations, or motivational speeches. Truths that, once brought to light, would have real consequences. And Marcus also knew something else, something none of those employees could even imagine. Soon, everything would change. When the truth was finally revealed, when his identity was no longer a mystery and could no longer be ignored, the same people who looked at him with disdain would learn one of the greatest lessons of their lives. Not about service protocols or professional etiquette, but about humanity, about respect, about the value of treating everyone with dignity, regardless of appearance. Marcus took a deep breath, steady and composed. The day was only just beginning, and for many people there, it would be unforgettable. As Marcus continued waiting, the atmosphere seemed to reshape itself around the collective discomfort his presence provoked. It was as if the entire lobby, so accustomed to the impeccable shine of the elite, tried to hide him within the scenery, pushing him to the invisible edges of human attention. Guests came and went in a steady flow, receiving wide smiles, warm greetings, and a courtesy almost theatrical in its precision. For them, every detail was carefully orchestrated. For him, there was only indifference. A waiter appeared carrying an elegant tray, moving with the precision of someone who had learned to turn motion into choreography. But upon noticing Marcus, he shifted his path so abruptly that he nearly dropped one of the glasses. The gesture, though subtle, was revealing. It wasn't fear of helping. It was fear of having to deal with someone he believed didn't belong in that world. Almost comical, if it weren't so profoundly sad. Marcus stepped closer to a wall covered in white marble, its surface reflecting the environment like an opaque mirror. From there, he observed the overall movement with a critical yet serene gaze. It was not the look of someone hurt or offended. It was the look of a leader accustomed to reading beyond appearances, to seeing patterns where others saw isolated moments. He saw before him something far greater than simple service failures. He saw the culture of a place, deeply rooted. And Marcus knew a truth many overlooked. No best practices manual has any power when the human heart behind the service is contaminated by silent judgment. No motivational lecture is effective when respect is selective. No million-dollar decor, however splendid, can hide the fragility of a team that does not understand the value of equality. With each passing minute, Marcus understood more clearly what needed to change in that hotel. Not processes, not protocols. The mindset. The way each employee viewed the other. The way they evaluated people based on the wrong details. Even so, despite everything, there was hope in his eyes. Marcus believed, truly, in humanity's capacity to evolve when confronted with truth. He believed that sometimes all it took was a shock of reality to unveil everything that was wrong and begin a profound transformation. This was why he remained calm. He knew the truth was about to arrive. And when it did, it would come as an inevitable impact, a turning point that would change not only the behavior of those employees, but also the course of the St. Aurelius Hotel's history forever. And Marcus, silent and patient, was ready to be the catalyst for that change. When Marcus decided to walk a bit through the lobby, hoping to observe other areas and feel the hotel's true pulse, he had barely taken a few steps before being intercepted. A security guard, tall, robust, and wearing the stony expression of someone who takes his role seriously, but without subtlety, approached him with firm strides. He positioned himself directly in front of Marcus, blocking his path so abruptly that any onlooker might have thought he had just stopped an intruder. "Sir, some areas are restricted. Only guests and authorized individuals are allowed beyond this point," he declared in a harsh tone, closer to a warning than guidance. The guard's eyes assessed Marcus with open suspicion, as if his mere presence were enough to trigger a silent alarm. Marcus kept his expression serene. "I'm just observing the environment," he replied calmly, without altering his tone. But the explanation made no difference. The guard maintained his rigid stance, insisting that Marcus remain within a specific section of the lobby. In every word, there was an evident, nearly shouted, message. He did not trust him. Not because of anything Marcus had done, but because of what he seemed to be. The scene did not go unnoticed. Some employees watched with discreet smiles, approving the preventive action. Others simply observed with mild curiosity, as if witnessing a mundane episode that had nothing to do with them. In none of their faces did Marcus detect empathy. Even so, he did not react with irritation. Acting on impulse was not in his nature. He knew that every display of hostility revealed a structural crack, and this hotel seemed full of them. The culture there was neither welcoming nor genuinely excellent. It was a culture that judged before asking, labeled before understanding. A culture that, behind its luxurious facade, revealed something profoundly poor. As he walked back to the center of the lobby, Marcus noticed a newly arrived couple. They wore simple but clean clothes and carried a small suitcase. He observed them for a few seconds as they approached the reception desk. The service they received was cold, mechanical, the same empty smile he himself had received earlier. The receptionist spoke quickly, without looking directly at them, as if she were eager to attend someone more important. That was the final piece of the equation Marcus had been assembling since he entered. The St. Aurelius Hotel knew how to treat the wealthy. It knew how to impress those who brought money, status, power, or polished appearances. But it failed miserably at treating people well, and that failure, as deeply rooted as it was silent, would cost dearly once the truth came to light. After all, no one there imagined that the humble-looking man they were trying to avoid was about to reveal himself as the most important person in that place, someone who would change the hotel's fate forever. After almost half an hour of being completely ignored, Marcus finally decided to approach the receptionist again. His steps were calm, but there was a clarity of purpose in them that hadn't been there before. When he spoke, his voice carried a different weight. Not irritation, but restrained authority, the quiet firmness of someone accustomed to leading without ever needing to raise his voice. "Ma'am, I really need to speak with an immediate manager," he said with impeccable politeness, yet with a firmness impossible to overlook. The receptionist raised an eyebrow, the discomfort visible in every inch of her expression. She seemed torn between impatience and the conviction that Marcus was not someone worthy of special attention. "As I already said, sir, we're busy. Managers do not attend to people without a reservation or clear identification. You'll need to wait." The words fell hard, almost abrasive, making it clear that in her mind, that was an unbreakable boundary. Marcus took a slow breath, aware that insisting on that conversation would be as productive as trying to persuade a marble wall. He didn't get irritated, he simply understood. There was a barrier there, one that would not be crossed with explanations, but only with the truth when it finally came to light. So he gave a faint smile, not a smile of resignation, nor irony. It was an enigmatic smile, calm, the smile of someone who sees farther than those around him, a smile no one in that lobby knew how to interpret. It was then that, on the other side of the room, two administrative employees crossed the space carrying thick folders. They were engaged in a serious conversation, but upon spotting Marcus, they slowed down. Their eyes widened slightly, and they exchanged quick glances, the kind of recognition that appears when someone realizes they're looking at a familiar, important figure, but hasn't fully processed who it is yet. Marcus noticed immediately. It was the moment he had been waiting for. People who knew who he truly was were about to walk through that lobby. People who, unlike the others, understood that this simple man in modest clothes was not an intruder, but someone with enough authority to turn that hotel completely upside down. Before he could take a step toward them, the receptionist called another guest, ignoring him once again as if he were invisible. It was a small, almost mechanical gesture, but one that symbolized the entire problem. Marcus then understood something even deeper. The change he intended to bring to that hotel would be far greater and more complex than he had imagined. It wouldn't be just about correcting behavioral flaws. It would be about rebuilding values, reshaping mindsets, and redefining the very essence of service in that place. And that realization, far from discouraging him, only strengthened his determination. He was exactly where he needed to be. As the administrative employees slowly approached, Marcus felt his mind drift briefly to the past, to the moment he accepted the position of general director of that hotel. He hadn't taken the job for the prestige, nor for the generous salary, nor even for the grandeur of the St. Aurelius name. He accepted it because he saw in that place a rare opportunity to transform not only processes and numbers, but people. To rescue something that many luxury hotels over time lost: humanity. Marcus had always believed that true excellence is not born from the shine of expensive chandeliers, the imported marble walls, or the meticulously standardized services. It is born from respect, empathy, and the ability to recognize value in every person who walks through the door, whether a millionaire guest or someone in simple clothing. And the St. Aurelius, though proud of its impeccable aesthetics, had forgotten that. He knew it, and that was precisely why he had been chosen, because he had the gift of uniting high-standard hospitality with genuine human value. That was what made him different. That was what made him necessary. Now, being treated as an inconvenience, as someone out of place in that gilded world, Marcus saw with even greater clarity the weight of the responsibility he carried. That hotel needed him, far more than it realized. He took a deep breath, straightened his posture, and felt the air shift around him. Every detail seemed to announce that the decisive moment was approaching. The administrative employees, who now recognized him, continued moving forward, and their expressions made it clear that the situation was about to change abruptly. But before Marcus could take even a single step toward them, the assistant manager, the same one who had treated him with disdain earlier, reappeared. He carried a clipboard in hand and wore the impatient expression of someone who believes he is dealing with an unwelcome problem. He approached quickly, and with the same harsh tone as before, declared, "Sir, I already told you that you cannot walk around here. I'm going to ask you to leave." The entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. Some employees stopped walking. Others watched the scene with wide eyes. There was something different in the air, something no one could name yet, but everyone could feel. And it was exactly in that instant, in that second suspended between mistake and revelation, that everything began to change. At the very moment the assistant manager repeated, with all his misguided authority, that Marcus needed to leave, one of the administrative employees finally got close enough to see his face clearly. It was like watching a light switch on abruptly. The employee's eyes widened, his breath caught, and the folder he was carrying slipped several centimeters from his hand, nearly falling to the floor. "Director Marcus, you arrived today? We were expecting your visit later." The impact of those words was immediate. The lobby fell into a silence so absolute one could hear the air being pulled into shocked throats. A heavy, uncomfortable silence that seemed to fill every corner of that luxurious space, as if even the golden chandeliers had hesitated to keep shining. The assistant manager turned pale in a way no training could disguise. The receptionist brought a hand to her mouth, eyes wide, feeling the monumental weight of the moment crash down upon her. Other employees froze where they stood, as if time itself had been paused by an invisible command. Marcus, however, kept the same calm he had maintained all morning. He simply gave a slight nod. "Yes, I arrived earlier. I decided to make an unannounced visit." The sentence fell over the lobby like a silent thunderclap. It needed no volume. The truth behind it had more than enough force to echo through the entire room. All eyes inevitably turned to the assistant manager. The man was sweating, trembling, seemed to shrink inside his own uniform. He tried to speak, but his voice failed, stumbling over syllables. "Leave, I didn't know, I..." The words died before they could form. It was as if his own tongue refused to participate in the humiliation. Marcus said nothing. He didn't need to. He simply observed. And in his eyes there was no fury, no humiliation, no revenge. There was truth. A raw, undeniable truth that exposed the fragility of rushed judgments, silent prejudices, and attitudes built on appearances. The truth that the way we treat those we believe to be nobody reveals exactly who we are. In that moment, the entire lobby, from the newest intern to the most experienced receptionist, from the barista to the petrified assistant manager, was about to learn one of the deepest, most transformative lessons of their lives. The manager, now completely drained of color, remained motionless for a few seconds, trying to compose himself while watching the director walk down the corridor. Every step Marcus took seemed to echo through the lobby like a powerful reminder. Hasty judgments always exact a price, and arrogance pays in silent embarrassment. He remembered clearly the haughtiness with which he had treated this man just minutes before, and the shame burned like fire on his skin, scorching more fiercely than any formal reprimand ever could. The other employees, who had previously carried themselves with confidence and pride, began to shrink before that serene and resolute presence. Every gesture of disdain, every whispered comment, every fake smile now seemed small and insignificant, dissolving in the reality that imposed itself silently but undeniably. The lobby, once filled with decorative haste, transformed into a space of collective confession, living proof that appearance and status never define someone's true greatness. Marcus did not show satisfaction in another's humiliation. Exposing weaknesses or instilling fear was never his goal. His eyes remained steady, observant, but focused on what truly mattered, the mission that had brought him there. He knew that this visit was not a test of power, but an opportunity to transform an entire culture, to show that true excellence arises from respect, empathy, and the humanity extended equally to everyone. And that was exactly what was beginning to happen in that moment. The first step of transformation was not merely reorganizing processes or reviewing protocols. It was restoring what had been most absent there: respect, a simple, silent value, yet one capable of redefining everything. As Marcus advanced down the corridor, the entire lobby seemed to breathe in unison, aware that they were in the presence of someone who did not merely hold a position, but embodied the change that this place so desperately needed. He continued walking through the lobby, each step carrying the calm certainty of someone who had nothing to prove to anyone. He no longer saw himself as the ridiculed stranger from minutes before, but as the leader who could see with absolute clarity both the potential and the flaws of the environment he was destined to improve. Marcus noticed details that would escape the attention of any ordinary visitor. The way some employees offered artificial smiles only to selected guests, while others were ignored or treated with disdain. The rush to demonstrate efficiency only when someone with the appearance of wealth approached. And, above all, the almost mechanical atmosphere that replaced genuine empathy, as if luxury service had forgotten that true luxury also includes humanity. Walking through that space was not merely about fulfilling the role of director, it was about recognizing patterns, identifying weaknesses, and deeply understanding the culture that needed to be transformed. He knew the weight of every judgmental glance, every impersonal gesture, because he had felt it himself. And it was precisely because of those experiences that he was determined to break the cycle, with firmness, but without violence, with authority, but without arrogance. In that hall, surrounded by nervous glances and restrained gestures, Marcus felt something solidify. This was where real change would begin. Not with speeches or empty orders, but with actions that would transform everyone's perception of what it means to serve and what it means to respect. Every step he took marked the beginning of a new era for the St. Aurelius. Upon reaching the center of the lobby, Marcus stopped and slowly turned, causing all the employees to finally lift their eyes to him. Each one remained motionless, as if any movement might worsen an already uncomfortable situation. The silence was almost tangible, heavy with tension and anticipation. His expression, firm yet serene, made it clear that there was no desire for revenge, nor satisfaction in exposing mistakes. There was something far more powerful, the determination to transform, to guide each person present to see beyond appearances, beyond haste and indifference. He took a deep breath. Every word that was about to follow would not be a standard corporate speech, nor a set of cold rules. It would be the foundation of a new culture, a change that would begin right there, in that moment, in that space that until recently had been a stage for silent disdain. And then, with a clear and firm voice yet filled with humanity, he began, "The true luxury of a hotel is not in the chandeliers, the suites, or the size of the pools, but in how you make people feel." Each syllable carried weight, not of imposed authority, but of lived experience. Marcus spoke as someone who knew the pain of being ignored, underestimated, and judged by appearances. And at the same time, he spoke as someone who understood the value of being recognized, heard, and respected. The entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. This was not just a lesson being delivered, it was a mirror held up to each employee, a mirror reflecting not only their gestures and smiles, but the heart behind every action. And in that instant, without grand ceremony, a truth became clear. Respect and humanity are the true luxury, and from that moment on, they would define the future of the Saint Aurelius. He continued his speech, now with an almost inspiring intensity, making each word resonate through the lobby as if the very space itself bowed to the truth he was speaking. No training, no elegant uniform, no manual of best practices can replace character, he stated with calm firmness. Marcus remembered how that morning he had tested the hotel not with cold reports, but with humanity, and the results had been revealing. Efficiency was there, yes, impeccable, almost mechanical, but the essential, that which separates luxury service from elegant indifference, was missing. You have shown efficiency, but you failed in what is essential: respect. Not just respect for the client, but respect for the human being. The sentence echoed through the lobby, cutting through the restrained murmurs and stopping hearts for a few seconds. Some employees swallowed hard, as if swallowing their own guilt. Others lowered their heads, confronting for the first time a mirror they could not ignore. Every gesture, every posture, every look was now illuminated by the truth Marcus spoke. The truth that the way we treat others reveals who we truly are. He did not speak to humiliate them, nor to instill fear. He spoke to shake them, to remind them that every person who crosses those doors carries a story, dignity, a value that cannot be bought with luxury, cannot be measured by titles or credit cards, and cannot be ignored without consequences. The lobby was silent, attentive, and in that heavy, yet full of potential-eyed silence, Marcus knew that a seed had been planted. A seed that, if carefully nurtured, could transform not just the hotel's service, but the heart of every employee present. And with each word, the change began to take shape, slow but inevitable. Finally, Marcus paused, took a deep breath, and concluded, his voice now filled with calm and conviction. Great change does not begin with extravagant speeches or authoritarian orders, but with small daily actions, gestures that reveal character, empathy, and respect. He shared, briefly but profoundly human, that he too had once faced his own battles, that he had worked in hotels, had been underestimated, and knew the painful feeling of being treated as if he didn't belong in certain places. Each word seemed imbued not with resentment, but with transformative experience. And now, there, in front of those employees, he proved that the world turns, and every turn demands humility. May this hotel be remembered not for the wealth it displays, but for the greatness it offers. The final sentence sounded firm, clear, and serene at the same time, blending authority with hope. There was no imposition, yet there was power. The power of truth, of experience, and of the vision of someone who understands what truly matters. The silence that followed was not one of fear or submission. It was a silence full of reflection, the kind of stillness that arises when someone realizes that everything they believed about right and wrong, about value and appearance, needed to be reconsidered. For the first time, those employees understood something essential. They had received not just a director, but a lesson that, if absorbed, would change everything from that moment onward. The way they serve, listen, and see every person who crosses those doors. And in that silent lobby, the seed of a profound and lasting transformation had finally been planted. After the speech, Marcus began walking toward the main staircase, his steps echoing lightly through the lobby, but on the first step, he stopped. The gesture, simple and restrained, seemed to carry more weight than any grand movement. He turned slowly, casting a direct look at the semi-guilty faces of the employees. Now they no longer saw him as the humble man they had mistreated hours before. Recognition was clear. Here was someone possessing a quiet strength, capable of transforming any environment, an authority that did not need to be imposed but manifested clearly through truth and integrity. In that moment of strategic pause, Marcus reinforced something even more important than his title or hierarchical position. No one grows by humiliating others, but everyone grows when they learn to recognize their own mistakes. The words fell over the lobby like an inevitable truth, profound, personal, and inescapable. They passed through proud hearts, cut across challenging gazes, and touched consciences that had until then believed arrogance and indifference were signs of strength. It was evident that before them stood not just a director managing a luxury hotel. Here was someone who led by example, who taught through experience, and whose authority derived not from titles, but from the ability to inspire genuine change. In that moment, the lobby, the luxury, the impeccable uniforms, and the wary glances transformed into something far greater. A space ready to learn, evolve, and become worthy of the greatness Marcus had always known could be achieved there. And in that silence, heavy with reflection, everyone understood that this was not merely about obeying a leader, but about absorbing a lesson that would forever change the way they saw themselves and the work they performed. Shortly after, Marcus requested that everyone gather in the conference room for an extraordinary meeting. The atmosphere around the group was a delicate mix of expectation, apprehension, and, curiously, hope. For the first time, many felt they were about to learn something that had never been taught in any training manual or motivational seminar. Once everyone was seated, he began the meeting calmly, yet engagingly, sharing a fragment of his own journey. He spoke of the jobs he had held, of environments where he had not been respected, of doors that had closed not due to lack of competence, but because of judgmental gazes and silent prejudices. Each story carried authenticity and weight, turning personal experiences into universal lessons. With every word, he invited his employees to put themselves in another's shoes. With every sentence, he demonstrated that a single action, a gesture of attention or disdain, could change not just a day but an entire life. He did not speak of rules or procedures. He spoke of humanity, empathy, and the true essence of service. In that moment, the St. Aurelius ceased to be merely a luxury hotel with imposing walls and rigid protocols. It transformed into a living classroom where the most important lesson was about people, about listening, understanding, and respecting every individual who crossed those doors. And as Marcus spoke, something began to shift in every heart present, a quiet awareness that true luxury was not in the marble or the chandeliers, but in the greatness of what they offered each other and the guests they served. He continued, his voice firm and serene, explaining that leadership does not mean commanding, displaying authority, or instilling fear, but inspiring. You don't need to be perfect, he said, but you need to be genuine. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with meaning, a reminder that authenticity always outweighs the appearance of competence. Then, Marcus introduced a new training program, structured differently from anything the hotel had ever known. The focus was not on protocol techniques or rigid service standards, but on fundamental values, empathy, active listening, and genuine care. These would be the pillars capable of transforming not only the service, but the entire culture of the St. Aurelius. As he outlined the changes, something began to emerge in the employees, a slow but powerful awareness. The initial discomfort caused by the surprise visit and the director's direct speech began to transform into opportunity. An opportunity for professional growth, but also for personal growth. They realized that it wasn't just the hotel that was about to improve. It was themselves. Marcus then reinforced the central idea of the entire transformation. The greatest distinction of a true professional does not lie in a flawless uniform, a rehearsed speech, or mechanical efficiency. It lies in the ability to treat every person with the same respect, regardless of social class, appearance, or expectations. Every gesture of attention, every sincere word, every empathetic action would now be the true luxury defining the hotel's excellence. And in that moment, the seed of change planted with courage and humanity began to take root in every heart present in the room. At the end of the meeting, Marcus did something no one expected. He expressed gratitude. Not for the way he had been treated, quite the opposite, but for the fact that the situation had revealed clearly and undeniably where the hotel needed to evolve. The gesture, simple and genuine, affected the employees in a way that no lecture or reprimand ever could. It was as if he were silently saying that mistakes do not define anyone, but remorse and the willingness to change can redefine everything. Some employees, still shaken by the surprise and the weight of the truth, approached to apologize personally. Marcus received them with full attention, listening to every word without any hint of superiority or judgment. His gaze and posture conveyed something far more valuable than authority. They conveyed respect and trust in each person's potential. The room, which moments before had been heavy with tension and discomfort, now overflowed with a different feeling, light, intense, and inspiring. There was a sense of renewal and possibility in the air. It was the beginning of a new culture at the St. Aurelius, a culture where learning and empathy mattered more than arrogance or appearances. In that moment, every employee understood that they were not just receiving instructions, but being invited to take part in a profound transformation. A transformation that began within each of them and would be reflected in every gesture, every smile, and every interaction from that moment forward. When the day finally ended, Marcus walked through the lobby once more. But now, the place felt different. Where coldness had once reigned, there was respect. Where suspicious eyes had scanned every corner, genuine smiles now appeared. And where arrogance had existed, humility now flourished. The environment, tense all morning, was breathing transformation. He knew there was still much work ahead, that deep changes require consistency and patience. But he also knew that this had been the necessary first step, and that the seed planted that day would begin to grow, slowly but powerfully, within the culture of the St. Aurelius. Before leaving, he paused for a moment, looking back, absorbing every detail of that lobby now carrying a different spirit. He reflected on everything that had happened. The man underestimated for his appearance had become the leader who, with calm and firmness, had shown the true value of humanity. And in that moment, his story left a clear and powerful lesson. The world always tries to judge by appearances, but it is essence that determines how far someone can go. Nothing shines brighter than someone who succeeds without stepping on anyone. Someone capable of transforming not only their own life, but also the lives of everyone around them. As he walked away, the lobby remained silent, but it was a different silence. A silence filled with respect, hope, and the beginning of a change that no one there would ever forget. The true luxury of the St. Aurelius was, at last, beginning to bloom.